Greetings everyone, welcome to another one of our free Friday community classes. This is actually part 3 of 3 in a little series that I've been doing on how plant spirit work dovetails with our greater spiritual traditions. So this week we are talking about green sorcery as a spiritual path. Last week we talked about paganism as the plant spirits teach it, and the week before that, plant work in your spiritual tradition. I will link to all of those videos down in the details below, so if you missed any of them, you can watch all 3 and see how they all fit together. So this week we were talking about green sorcery as a spiritual tradition, as a way to dovetail and interface with the universe, with the cosmos, with our spiritual paths. And I think a good place to start this conversation is probably to define what green sorcery is, right? People ask, so let's talk about it. So first of all, sorcery, an often misrepresented and misunderstood word, is really implies the consorting with spirits, consorting with non-human, other than human, more than human spirits. It's the process by which we evoke and invoke non-human beings in order to assist us in our spiritual workings, whether it be magical, medicinal, revelatory, divinatory, for personal spiritual growth, whatever the situation may be. Whenever you see this term sorcery, as long as it's being used in its appropriate meaning, it just means that we're consorting with spirits. We're hanging out with spirits that are not human, and more often than not, it's to learn from them, right? To have them take us on as students and to teach us from their perspectives, which is important. So sorcery, the art of consorting with spirits, very animistic, obviously. In order for sorcery to happen, there has to be an understanding and an awareness, and ideally an experience, that the world is filled with persons who are not necessarily human, that humans are not the only people in the room. We're not the most important people in the room. In order for us to reach out to non-human persons, we have to be aware that non-human persons are there. And so in our particular work of green sorcery, those persons we are reaching out to, of course, are the plants. We see the plants and experience the plants as arcane spirits, as beings in their own right who possess consciousness and communication and wisdom and intelligence and power and virtue. And so when we do green sorcery, because it is something done more than it is something thought or pondered, we are engaging in a sorcerous way with the plants. We are approaching the plants as spirits, hoping to open up channels of communication, relationship, and cycles of sacred reciprocity. So if that's interesting to you, by the way, I did do a free course series here on YouTube about green sorcery. I believe it's called An Introduction to Green Sorcery. I will link to that down in the details below as well. So if you missed that, you can go back and catch up. So 3 ways that this process of green sorcery, of connecting with plant spirits in sorcerous ways, can act as a spiritual path for us. And in telling you how green sorcery can act as a spiritual path, I'll also be sort of telling you what I think a spiritual path should do, what the point of it is, right? First and foremost, our work with the plants in sorcerous ways can act as a compass, helping us align more efficiently to the ways of the cosmos. It's easy to think of this in terms of morality or even ethics, behaving appropriately, doing what we're supposed to do, doing what we're told, following the rules. But it's not exactly that. And part of why sorcerous arts have gotten the bad reputation that they have is because they are generally amoral. I talk about this a lot in a lot of our classes. Amoral meaning that there is no set standard of how somebody should behave. Rather, they are ethical and harmonious. So we don't have a set of 10 commandments that we follow no matter what. Rather, we behave in the moment in a way that creates the most beauty, the most harmony, the most magic and medicine. So it's more ethical than it is more moral. But even that we could say it's more about harmony. So when we walk the path of green sorcery, we very quickly learn through feedback and through the teachings of our plant spirit allies how we can behave in ways that help us feel more harmonized with the greater cosmos, with nature, and how when we do things that create disharmony and ugliness and dis-ease and all of that, we end up sort of reaping what we sow. Plants teach us time and time again that what we do in this moment lays the groundwork for what's possible in the next moment, right? There are no late concepts of misappropriate definitions of karma here. It's not like that. It's not a situation of plants punishing you or some deity punishing you because you did something wrong. No, it is literally the way the cosmos works, that what you do in this moment creates the soil by which the plant of the next moment can grow, right? So if you do beautiful, harmonious, fertile things in this moment, then the next step in your life will have more possibility, more potential. It will be more lucky, more synchronized. If we do things each moment that don't create fertile soil, that are toxic or misaligned, whether that's externally or even internally within our own mental atmosphere, it limits the types of things that we can do in the next step. It limits how fertile that soil is and what we can grow in the garden of our life journey. So part one here is that green sorcery gives us a compass by which we can move through the world, thinking thoughts, saying words, doing actions that hopefully lead to greater synchronicity and greater harmony with the cosmos and just a better life experience overall. Part two is that green sorcery allows us to enter into deeper relationships with the spirits of place. So that means that we learn through this work how to be in community with humans and non-humans. And in so doing, we receive the benefit of strength in numbers. We receive the benefit of never being alone. We receive the benefit of having diverse perspectives, blessings, protections on us all the time, because rather than walking through the world assuming that we are the only smart people in it, we are aware that the animals, the insects, the plants, the trees, the celestial bodies, the land itself, landmarks, and many, many non-corporeal, invisible, to us anyway, persons share their spaces with us. And it is part of the very first steps of working any sorceress path, and especially green sorcery, that we become aware that we are in spaces where other people live too. And we try to start behaving in a way that's respectful to them so that we can be honorable people and be virtuous people, but also so that we don't incur their anger, because they oftentimes have a great deal of influence over what can happen to us. And they are also capable of blocking things coming into our lives. So we want to be in good relationship with them, making sure that our behavior does not impede on their quality of life as much as possible, making sure that we honor the way that they share space with us, that they contribute to the fertility of the land, that they contribute to the turning of the seasons, that they contribute to the protection and the plenty and the peace that we enjoy in our homes and communities and businesses. When we don't acknowledge them, it's an invitation to disaster. You can read any of the fairy lore, you can read any of the elf lore, and you'll see what happens when people just behave like nothing matters but what the human wants, right? So green sorcery will bring us into relationship with all the spirits around us wherever and whenever we may be. Part three is that this practice helps us to close the circle of death and birth. What does that mean? Most religion is wrapped up in the mystery of death, rebirth, right? Most of what religion is about is helping us either secure a place in a life after this one, or help us understand what's going to happen next, or help alleviate some kind of fear or worry about what will happen after we die, or maybe even reaffirm some ideas that nothing exists after this, or that everything exists after this. A lot of the bigger spiritual traditions in the world, the bigger religions, are about teaching people that nature, the world is false. It is an illusion, it is a trap, and that we have to do everything possible to get away from it. Animism and sorcery are the opposite. We are about embracing nature, embracing life, embracing the beautiful cycles that are taught by our plant allies. So when we do plant spirit work, when we practice green sorcery, we very quickly pick up on the fact that plants teach some version of transmigration of the soul, transmigration of spirit, that the plants teach us that everything that dies returns in its own cycle, that life does not end. There is no termination of vital force, rather there is just transformation. And so we see in all of the old folklore, all of the old pagan folklore, in different ways, not described necessarily in the nice, tidy New Age terminology that we're used to, but described in its own poetic way, how death is just one step of the journey, and that there's a mystery that exists between death and life, and that part of why we engage with spirituality is to close that gap, to understand more about the mysteries that exist between death and birth, and how our work with more than human beings, whether that be gods, deities, ancestors, plant spirits, helps us open the path so that when we move out of this life, out of this expression, into whatever we're going to do next, there is camaraderie there is kinship, there are protectors and guides, and that is very important. Much of our ancient pagan lore is really about that, right? It's really about having allies on the other side of the hedge who, when it is your time to take your last breath, will be there to welcome you into their halls, into their courts, or to guide you into the realms of your ancestors, or back into the land, or whatever. When people have asked me in the past what happens when we die, I tell them the same thing the plant spirits tell me, which is you go where your gods go. We don't all go to the same place. We don't all work the same path. If you have a deity or someone that you're very, very close to, part of that contract, that relationship may be that when you leave here, you go with them and work with them on whatever they do and wherever they may be. So the possibilities are infinite, as the trees teach us, but this idea of fear of death, fear of extinction, thinking that when we die, that's it. No, one part of us does go back into the earth and become, nourishment for fertile soil for the next round of growth on that level. And on the spiritual level, we move on into the next season of our perspective, our journey, our whatever it is we're doing. So 3 ways that doing green sorcery, embodying green sorcery, can bring spiritual fulfillment through acting in harmonious ways in the world, through relating to non-human persons in magical and sorcerous ways, and through closing the circle between death and birth. So I think these are really fun topics to consider. Again, kind of part 3 in a little 3-part series. I got like an influx of questions about how to do plant spirit work if I'm this kind of pagan, or I'm this kind of religious, or I'm not anything at all. How to approach something that feels on the surface very spiritual, like a spiritual tradition, if I'm not that, or I don't know if I'm that. And the reality is that the beauty of animism and sorcery and spirit work is you can pretty much dovetail it into whatever it is or is not that you are doing and make it work. So I want to thank folks who are over on the Patreon for all your support. We've got some really fun stuff going on right now. So if you're interested in getting a little deeper into this work with me, then please come over and see what we're up to. I also invite you to read my books. I've written 2 of them on this subject. I will link to them down in the comments below. And make sure, if you have not subscribed to this channel, to do so that you will get a notice every time I put a video up. There's several that come out every week. I don't want you to miss anything. Until next time, see ya. Peace and plenty.